Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. Many girls are bathing? What's so interesting bathing in the wilderness? Wait a minute, I've met girls bathing in the wilderness before. He was suddenly reminded of an incident and couldn't help shuddering. He muttered, it couldn't be that old demon, right? Impossible, it couldn't survive so long in great ruins. I must be worrying too much. But to be careful, let's take a roundabout way. Suddenly, a loud voice came from behind. Dao friend, it's a small world, eh? Qin Mu turned his head back and saw Yu Buchuan leading all the divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace over to kill them at an extremely fast speed. Those divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace cast their spells as they ran, and huge trees uprooted themselves, transforming into tree giants that sprinted forward with wide steps. At the same time, the ground trembled as mountain rocks rolled forward at a rapid speed, gathering together to form rock giants. Even the hill under Qin Mu's feet was trembling, the soil started to roll down. The mountain rocks in the hill rose up into a taller and taller structure until a hill giant was gradually formed. Looks like I can only rush forward. Hope it's not that old demon. Qin Mu gave a command, and the dragon Qilin immediately sprinted forward. The hill beneath their feet had already stood up, and the fire clouds under the dragon Qilin's feet blazed as he ran frantically down the arm of the hill giant. The giant turned its body and swung the other huge arm toward them. The dragon Qilin leaped into the sky, and a world-shattering rumble rang out behind them. The two arms of the hill giant smashed together and broke, which resulted in countless rocks flying away in all directions. Qin Mu turned his head back to take a look and saw that the moment the rocks landed on the ground, they tumbled back at the body of the hill giant as if they had grown legs. Not much later, the two arms grew back. Palace Master, the ultimate arts of your True Heaven Palace are indeed extraordinary. Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration. Xiu gathered her remaining magic power, and her palm smashed backward before rising. Instantly, a miserable shriek came from the hill giant's body. Green rays flew out the hill that formed the giant, and it vanished without a trace. The giant then also crumbled down, and huge rocks rolled away, returning to the shape of a hill. This spell is remarkable. Qin Mu's eyes lit up, and he asked, can you teach me? Xiu hesitated for a moment before nodding. You're the benefactor of us mother and daughter. If you want to learn, I will naturally teach you. Qin Mu smiled and said, I won't learn from you for nothing. True Heaven Palace is the sacred ground of West Earth, so I will also take out the legacy technique of a sacred ground to exchange with you. But let's leave this place first. While the dragon Qilin sprinted forward, the two white bats circled around, releasing sound waves to hit the experts of True Heaven Palace. Fatty dragon, faster, faster, the bats hurried the dragon Qilin. Shut up. The dragon Qilin went into a fury and shouted back, I'm already doing my best. Blazing flames came from his body that grew larger and larger, transforming in 120 yards behemoth. When he sprinted, he was as fast as lightning. In a few breaths' time, he crossed the mountain in front of them and came to the lake where the white bats said numerous girls were bathing. This lake was extremely clear, like a transparent jewel embedded within the mountains. From above, the bottom of the lake, which was dozens of yards deep, could be seen. There were no water plants or fish there. The lake was unimaginably clean. Trees were surrounding the huge lake in an orderly manner, while white cloths and pants hung on their branches. On the ground, there were embroidered shoes with white soles and brightly colored peonies at the front. The sounds of girls laughing and playing in the lake reached the group, along with melodious songs. It was as if this place was a paradise in the mortal world. The dragon Qilin barged into this place and got shocked. He didn't dare to break the serene atmosphere here, so he shouted out loudly, maidens in the lake, come to shore quickly. Ah! The girls in the lake all cried out in astonishment when they saw this behemoth barging in, while some of the more daring ones raised their fair arms and chuckled. Big fella, come down and play. Qin Mu looked at the girls in the lake, and his face turned ashen. He hurried the dragon Qin, fatty dragon, it's indeed that old demon from Lonely Mountain Ridge. Go quickly, go, we have to go around it. He wasn't scared of you Buchuan and the rest, but he was scared of that root demon from Lonely Mountain Ridge, the old demon that Heavenly Saint cult had suppressed for a long time. The old demon from Lonely Mountain Ridge. The dragon Qin jumped in shock, and all the dragon scales on his body stood up, nearly pricking Xiong Chia's feet. He immediately went around the lake and sprinted frantically in a straight line, his speed far surpassing what it was before. The mountain ridge behind them rumbled in the meantime, and mountain rocks flew in all directions. They came tumbling down from the top of the mountain, and it was obvious that it was Yu Buchuan leading the experts of True Heaven Palace to transform this mountain into a giant to attack them. This mountain was much higher than the hill before, so if it transformed into a giant, it would be quite easy for it to catch up to the group. At that moment, the elegant mountain suddenly crumbled and countless white skeletons rolled out from within it. Among them, there were both beast and human skeletons that piled up into a mountain of their own. There were so many of them that nearly the entire mountain had been hollowed out to hide them. This sight made Yu Buchuan and the rest who were in the back flabbergasted. What thing could eat so many people and strange beasts? Yu Buchuan couldn't bother to think about it though and said sternly, there are spirits in bones, so execute the secret arts to kill Nai Kuei. Everyone cast their spells, and countless bones crawled rapidly to form a white giant that was as tall as a mountain and which strode toward the lake for the shortest path toward the group. Yu Buchuan and the rest rose into the sky and landed on the white bone giant. Some women that were bathing in the lake couldn't avoid the giant's feet in time and got crushed to death. Yu Buchuan and the rest controlled the white bone giant to cross the lake in the chase after the dragon Qin who was sprinting frantically around the shore. At this moment, the water of the lake churned as several hundred women flew out into midair. Behind them were pitch-black tentacles, and they all shrieked in unison, Heavenly Saint Cult Master. Pack, pack, pack. Loud snapping sounds rang out continuously as the white bone giant got entrapped by the pitch-black tentacles. With a tight squeeze, the giant crumbled into pieces and countless shattered bones flew off in all directions. Over a dozen divine arts practitioners on 6 directions realm couldn't avoid them due to their low cultivation and got pierced through and fell into the water. Those with a slightly stronger cultivation also didn't have it easy defending against the shattered bones that came shooting over, each and every one of them vomiting blood from the impact. When divine arts practitioners that fell into the water tried to struggle out, the water of the lake started to bubble as countless pitch-black things that were like huge pythons swam over and coiled around them to pull them to the bottom of the lake. Yu Buchuan and the rest were dumbstruck. They hurriedly flew into the air to escape the lake. The peaceful scenery had suddenly become incomparably bustling. Naked women with tentacles kept coming from the lake and grabbing people to drag them into the depths. Some people immediately executed the divine arts of True Heaven Palace to try to control these strange roots. True Heaven Palace believed in all things having spirits and souls, so their divine arts could control all things no matter if they had life or not. All things could be controlled to transform into offensive attacks. Yet when they encountered such strange roots, their divine arts were completely useless. Over a dozen people got caught by the women on the roots, their life and death unknown as they got dragged into the lake. Heavenly Saint Cult Master, I finally found you. Yu Buchuan and the rest finally flew out of the huge lake and landed on the ground. Before they could even catch their breaths, they saw the huge trees on the shore uproot themselves and run frantically in the direction the dragon Qin had escaped. Yu Buchuan and the rest were startled and immediately began to run as well. The few strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace that were on Celestial Being Realm immediately unleashed their primordial spirits to execute their divine arts and withstand the attacks of the huge trees. After running for 100 miles away, they finally escaped the attacking range of the weird trees and roots. Everyone let out sighs of relief and slowed down their pace. If they traveled at a steady pace, they wouldn't feel tired even if they covered 1,000 miles, but when they escaped with all their might, 100 miles was enough for them to be out of breath. The dragon Qin also slowed down his pace as he panted heavily. He wasn't too far away from them. We should have escaped. Qin Mu let out a sigh of relief and said, the distance that the roots of this root demon can cover is merely 100 miles or so. Wait a minute. His expression became grim when he examined his surroundings. He saw that the vegetation was dense here and the trees created shade. This kind of forest was commonly seen, but as they passed through it, Qin Mu saw plants he'd never seen before. They were large flowers that were the height of a human, their tender buds closed up, but standing tall and upright. 2 large leaves grew on the sides of each stalk. Even though Qin Mu had learned medicinal knowledge from apothecary and could distinguish all kinds of plants and spirit herbs, he had never seen this kind of weird flowers. Yu Buchuan and the rest also barged into this flower forest and frowned when they saw the situation. However, they didn't stop chasing after Qin Mu and the others. Suddenly, a huge flower leisurely sprouted its stamens and its bud whirled as the petals slowly opened up. The color of those white petals gradually became darker, turning from light pink to pink before turning to bright red. When the flower completely bloomed, the maiden kneeling in the middle of it slowly rose and looked at Qin Mu, giving off a miserable shriek. "Heavenly Saint Cult Master, your Heavenly Saint Cult has made me so miserable." In the flower forest, the huge flowers bloomed one after another, and in the center of every one of them stood a maiden that looked as charming as jade. They all looked at Qin Mu and screeched, "So miserable." Qin Mu's scalp started to crawl, and he hurried the dragon Qilin, fatty dragon, set them on fire. "Fu brothers, use your sound waves to attack." The dragon Qilin spewed flames from his mouth while true fire also surrounded his body. The 2 white bats flew into the air and spat out sound waves. Qin Mu, in the meantime, executed Carefree Sword, and the divine sword swooped to and fro like lightning, slicing the roots that were attached to the buttocks of the women pouncing over. At this time, any other treasure sword would have been useless. Only this divine sword could defend against the roots of Lonely Mountain Ridge Root Demon. But if it was the true body of the old demon, Qin Mu wasn't certain that even Carefree Sword could defend against it. "The cultivation of this old demon seems to have improved," he said with worry. Whoosh! Countless maidens rose into the air, carrying the flowers and leaves to attack the people that had stepped into their forest. A divine arts practitioner of True Heaven Palace executed a jade tree, and 1,000 roots and branches of the jade tree attacked the maiden only to see the petals and leaves wrapped around her tightly. That divine arts practitioner was delighted and used the roots and branches of the jade tree to coil around her. However, the flower bud was slippery and escaped with a pop. A stamen then pierced through the head of that divine arts practitioner's. Yu Buchuan's expression changed drastically, and he shouted out, "Sacred treasure, please." The strange beast that looked like a violent ape with horns and was only a foot long jumped off his shoulder and beat its chest with its fists. Its body grew larger and larger before the creature opened its mouth to roar loudly. A treasure overflowing with green light then came out from its mouth. What the strange beast had spat out from its mouth was a bead that gave off a green glow. It lit up the surroundings with a lush green shine. However, it wasn't the bead that was glowing, but what inside, which looked like a green dragon swimming around. It was the rays of this green dragon that lit up the surroundings. Xiong Xiu saw the green light, and her complexion changed slightly. She hurriedly turned her head. "The green dragon bead of my True Heaven Palace." Qin Mu turned his head and saw that the perimeter the bead covered had already reached 3 yards. The green dragon in the bead had also become much clearer as it swam happily. The maidens in the flowers that had pounced at Yu Buchuan and the rest got hit by the light, and they lignified, turning into wooden sculptures. With their bodies stiff, they paused in midair. Popping sounds came from them, and green sprouts soon popped out from the lignified bodies. Branches then sprouted out, decorating their hosts with lush flora. The tentacles that were the roots of the root demon had become hardwood and couldn't move at all. Yu Buchuan led everyone forward as the violent ape strange beast with horns on its head followed closely with the bead held high up. Where the rays of the bead shone, the maidens in the flowers were frozen in all kinds of weird poses, without any two being the same. Green dragon bead. Qin Mu was slightly stunned. This bead was a remarkable treasure to actually be able to counter monsters such as the root demon. The sacred treasure of my True Heaven Palace has been snatched by them. Xiong Xiu sneered and stretched her hand out. The strange beast felt that the green dragon bead flew up and couldn't help becoming astonished. It hurriedly jumped onto it, trying to press it down. The celestial being realm's strong practitioners beside Yu Buchuan also burst forth with their vital chi to grab the green dragon bead, fighting with Xiongxiu. The green dragon bead then floated in midair, with the two sides in a temporarily into deadlock as they both wanted to control the sacred treasure. The two white bats immediately changed direction and circled around in the air. Countless fine hairs shot out toward Yu Buchuan and the rest as they tried to help snatch the treasured bead. In the blink of an eye, the two white bats' hairs had fallen off cleanly. They had been refined into unusual treasures and were like needles. If they hit flesh, those fine hairs would become abnormally soft, tunneling into the body and taking their host's life in an instant. The dragon Qilin trembled his body, and the scales on his body that were akin to an incomparably sharp shield whooshed through the air as they sliced toward Yu Buchuan and the rest. The dragon Qilin was instantly but naked, having only some Qilin hair at the tip of his dragon tail and big head. Xiongxiu's face lost color, and she immediately said, "Don't make a move." Before her voice even fell, the fine hairs of the two white bats were touched by the green light of the green dragon beam. It immediately lignified them and all of them fell to the ground. The two white bats wanted to call back their fine hairs, but they lost their connection with them. The two brothers stared with wide eyes at this situation and hugged their shoulders, at a loss. The dragon scales of the dragon Qilin also lignified, turning into wooden shields that dropped onto the floor. The fat dragon was also struck dumb, and his big belly fell to the ground. There had been scales covering it before, so it didn't hang down too much. However, without the scales, the flabs hung down uncontrollably. Cult Master. The dragon Qilin was at a loss and immediately turned to look at Qin Mu, who was on his back. Qin Mu had originally planned to unleash his 8,000 swords over, but after seeing the situation he abandoned that idea. The green dragon bead of True Heaven Palace was strange beyond conjecture. Even though the dragon Qilin's cultivation was not yet at Celestial Being Realm, his strength was no different when compared to those on Celestial Being Realm. His skin and flesh were also very thick. Back at the Battle of Heaven Wave City, when Duqian Devil King had descended and fought fiercely with the Dragon King, the aftermath of the collision had scraped the dragon Qilin's butt, but had only broken the scales, causing no heavy injuries to the dragon Qilin. This showed how strong was the defense of the dragon scales. The abilities of the two white bats were even stronger since they definitely reached the peak of Celestial Being Realm. They would also not use the fine hairs on their bodies recklessly. None of them would have ever expected that their treasures would lignify and lose control just by encountering the green light from the green dragon bead. If Qin Mu's 8,000 swords flew over, Carefree Sword would probably be the only one that wouldn't lignify. The other swords would all turn into wood. Xiongxiu grunted as her magic power could no longer fight against Yu Buchuan and the rest. The green dragon bead was about to fly over to Yu Buchuan and the rest when the ground suddenly trembled and countless roots poured out from underground, filling the sky. The roots formed a huge pitch-black wooden callus which wrapped around the green dragon bead before pulling it underground. Xiongxiu and Yu Buchuan were caught off guard and both sides couldn't pull back the green dragon bead in time, letting that root demon snatch it away. Yu Buchuan said sternly, "Green dragon bead is the treasure of my True Heaven Palace and sealed inside it is a true soul of a green dragon. This old demon won't be able to swallow it." Suddenly, the ground trembled even more violently, and everyone had a hard time keeping their footing. The ground shook non-stop and was actually rising upward as if there was a behemoth below. Boom! The soil and rocks flew in all directions as vegetation flooded out from underground, lifting them up higher and higher. The dragon Qilin immediately leaped to one side, and a tree crown with a radius of several hectares flooded out, brushing past their bodies. The two white bats hurriedly flew up before remembering that their bodies were still bare. They then immediately used their two hands to cover their lower parts. This caused them to fall straight down and head first into the dense tree. The two white bats were slightly stunned. They saw that the tree was still growing frantically, the tree crown getting larger and larger. The trunk was also becoming taller and taller, therefore, not long later, the white clouds floated past by the tree crown. The air became cooler and cooler while the sunlight became more and more intense. The two white bats found it difficult to breathe and immediately flew down from the tree crown. This flight was a long journey down, as the tree crown was actually incomparably huge and thick. Even though their speed was very fast, they still spent quite some time flying out. Below them was a head-spinning height. Out of the foliage, they saw an incomparably thick tree that was much taller than the mountains around it. The two white bats immediately flew down, but only saw the ground after a while. Rumbling sounds kept coming from the huge tree in the meantime, and every once in a while, countless branches would grow out frantically to form a second, third, and fourth tree crown. The two white bats avoided obstacles repeatedly. At one point, lightning crackled in midair, striking here and there. Rain then slowly started pattering down. When the two white bats landed on the ground, they immediately covered their lower bodies and turned to look around. They didn't see Qin Mu and the rest, only a majestic trunk that was like a mountain blocking their vision. The ground split continuously as roots that were as thick as dragons pushed through. They crackled and spread into the distance. Even some mountains that were far away got tangled by the roots until they were sealed tight. By then, the sunlight was completely covered, so there wasn't much light. The Fu brothers flew onto the trunk and climbed the tree rapidly, searching for Qin Mu and the rest. Suddenly, a familiar voice came from the bottom layer of the tree crown, and fibrous roots came hanging down from the tree crown. They swung to and fro with huge flower buds. This should be the original body of the root demon, right? Qin Mu said. Fu Yuqiu and Fu Yuchen hurriedly crawled over where they heard his voice and only let out sighs of relief when they saw him, the dragon Qin, and the rest. They leaped off from the trunk of the tree and used their wings to cover their bodies. Qin Mu raised his head to look at the transformed root demon and was ineffably astonished. He went forward to peel open a huge flower bud hanging down. Inside it, there was a maiden hanging motionlessly with her arms dangling. This maiden opened her eyes weakly and took a look at Qin Mu, saying with a weak breath, "Heavenly Saint Cult Master." Qin Mu closed the maiden's eyes, but she opened them again to stare at him fiercely. Qin Mu went to open other flower buds, and inside all of them were maidens hanging upside down. They were the strange things that Lonely Mountain Ridge root demon had born and weren't independent life forms. These girls were just a part of the root demon's body. The root demon was just a bunch of roots that had absorbed the blood of a god and devil to become a great demon. It didn't have a trunk, but now that it had absorbed the energy of green dragon bead and grew its trunk, it will only be even more terrifying. Qin Mu was worried. "Let us leave this place as soon as possible." The white bat brothers saw that there was some of their hair on the floor which was no longer in their lignified state and were delighted. They trembled their bodies and pulled their hair back. Noticing it, the dragon Qin swayed his body and the scales that had returned to normal flew back as well. Xiongxiu shook her head. In the green dragon bead there was a true soul of a green dragon, and this great demon won't be able to absorb it. It's most likely controlled by the energy in green dragon bead and can't move. As long as we find the green dragon bead that it had swallowed, we will be able to turn the tables and kill Yu Buchuan with his rebels. Xiongxia was curious. "Mom, if we take out the green dragon bead, will this root demon come back to life?" Xiongxiu shuddered. Now that the green dragon bead was suppressing the root demon, if they took it, the root demon would recover its mobility and they would be in danger once again. Suddenly, a voice spoke. "Young master, the green dragon bead is here." Qin Mu's expression changed drastically. "Crap! We can't let them dig out the green dragon bead." They looked toward the source of the voice and saw Yu Buchuan and the rest of the strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace looking at a piece of trunk. It was glowing with a lush green color, just like jade, lighting up an area of a hectare. It was obvious that Lonely Mountain Ridge root demon had swallowed the green dragon bead, and the terrifying energy within it had instantly lignified it, causing the trunk to grow out from the roots and pressing them down. The roots had also turned stiff and were unable to move. "Don't take out the green dragon bead. If you do it, the great demon will regain its mobility and none of us will live." After saying this, Yu Buchuan looked toward Qin Mu and the rest. He frowned slightly while the people beside him waited while protecting him. Qin Mu smiled. "Fellow senior brothers, how do you do? Can you still use the divine arts of True Heaven Palace here? If you can't, I can only send all of you on your way." Yu Buchuan's body suddenly flashed and came to the origin of the green light. He stretched his hand and reached into the trunk of the tree with a sneer. Heavenly Saint Cult Master, if I'm to die, we will all die together. Such fragrance, what's this smell? Just as he said this, the world started spinning for him and he collapsed. The smell of lost fragrance, Qin Mu answered while beaming. Thud, thud. The people of True Heaven Palace collapsed to the ground, with only the 3 experts of Celestial Being Realm able to barely endure it. However, their faces were all flushed and with lost fragrance suppressing their cultivation, there wasn't much magic power they could mobilize. Suddenly, there was the voice of a woman, and she was speaking while laughing. Lost fragrance, it's a kind of anesthetic, right? Let me take a whiff. Xiong Shiyu's expression changed drastically, while the 3 strong practitioners of Celestial Being Realm were delighted. Poisoner. Mu Xue. Qin Mu looked toward the source of the voice and saw a black-clothed woman with gold and silver accessories and a jade bead crown on her head. When she walked past the women hanging from the branches, they would wither and turn into a pile of ashes. Qin Mu took out a jade bottle and threw it over with a smile. It's an anesthetic, take a whiff and see. That woman in black was none other than Poisoner Mu Xue of True Heaven Palace. She wasn't old and her body emanated the vigor of youth from under her black clothes. Her skin was fair, contrasting well with the black clothes, and its whiter-than-snow tenderness suited her name well. She caught the jade bottle and only then did Qin Mu notice the black silk gloves that were very thin yet could protect her skin from coming into contact with the air. That pair of gloves couldn't be any ordinary object. People who were used to making poison needed to be very careful to keep themselves from coming into contact with toxic substances. Qin Mu was certain that those black silk gloves didn't have the quality of silk, but instead were airtight. The woman's chest was not moving up and down as she was relying on the pores of her skin to breathe in and out so that she wouldn't be poisoned. It was obvious that her abilities didn't rely on her cultivation or spirit weapons, but her poison. The cultivation realm was never the standard to measure apothecary's abilities. Even though his cultivation realm was very low, he could even kill a god with his poison. Mu Xue took a look at the jade bottle, but she didn't smell the lost fragrance within it. Instead, she revealed her arm and let her skin take a whiff. She absorbed a tiny amount and instantly felt half of her arm go numb, losing its sense of touch. What a wonderful drug! Her eyes lit up, and she stuffed the jade bottle before throwing it back to Qin Mu while praising him. Even though it can't paralyze strong practitioners on Celestial Being Realm, it can restrict their mobility. A remarkable anesthetic. Qin Mu flipped his palm and vital qi surged out, catching the jade bottle. He didn't let it come into contact with his hand but instead took out a 3-legged jade-eyed toad from his Daotai sack. That toad opened its mouth and swallowed the jade bottle, closed its mouth, then spat the jade bottle out. After that, Qin Mu placed it down, and the creature hopped toward Mu Xue. Xiong Xiuyu and the rest were staring blankly. They knew that Qin Mu had gathered herbs in the basin, but they didn't know when he'd caught a jade-eyed toad to put it in his Daotai sack. Big Sister Mu's poison is also extraordinary, Qin Mu praised. However, your poison is only minor and unqualified to take place in the higher circles, much less to be called unrivaled in the world. Mu Xue's eyes were snow-bright as she watched the jade-eyed toad hopping over. She gave a gentle flick with her finger, and a strand of vital qi thread transformed into a flying insect that flew here and there. The 3-legged toad swung its tongue out and caught that flying insect before croaking 2 times. Then, it swelled up like a balloon and became as huge as a cow. Qin Mu took out a spirit pill and gently sliced it through the center. Once it split open, buzzing sounds could be heard coming from within. The pill was actually empty, with only a mosquito inside. That mosquito vibrated its wings to fly onto the back of the toad and lie down there. Not long later, the toad became smaller and smaller while that mosquito became larger and larger. The stomach of the mosquito was like a huge water bag, but inside it was blood, which was not fresh red but instead lush green. By the time the mosquito had its fill, the 3-legged toad had returned to normal and was hopping around once again. It swung its tongue at the huge mosquito, but since it was too small, it couldn't swallow it. Mu Xue was astonished. Raising insects in spirit pills? Interesting. She bared her arms and revealed her delicate white skin. The mosquito immediately went forward to sting her arm, but just as it pierced her skin, that mosquito shrunk as if it was dehydrated and its color also changed. It turned red as it turned and flew back toward Qin Mu while blazing with flames. Qin Mu's pupils contracted, and he took out some spirit pills from his Dao-Tai sack. These pills were of different sizes and their colors were also all different. Qin Mu rapidly sliced them into cubes and took some of each according to ratios known to him alone. With a ball of flame coming out from his palm, he fused different medicinal energies, transforming them into another kind of pill. He opened his mouth to swallow this pill and hastened the medicinal energy while rolling up his sleeves. After sucking his blood, the mosquito returned back to its original color. It then flew leisurely back to Mu Yingxue. She sneered at him. "You didn't poison it?" Qin Mu's nose suddenly grew by a huge chunk, and his nostrils flared upwards, making him incomparably hideous. With a chuckle, he said, "If I didn't poison it, how would it have flown toward you?" "By following your scent." Mu Yingxue frowned slightly and stared at the mosquito that was flying over, trying to distinguish what poison Qin Mu had applied. After a moment, she took out a few kinds of herbs from her sleeves and dispensed them nimbly. She then spread them on her arm and let the mosquito sting her. Once it did so, Mu Yingshue's hair began to grow frantically. In an instant, it went in all directions, making her look like a porcupine. Poof! A soft pop sounded out, and Mu Yingxue felt that her buttocks were itchy. A bushy tail that reached the ground had grown out and burst open her pants. Mu Yingshue's complexion turned slightly dark. The mosquito had absorbed her blood, and the toxicity in its body had changed, making it lose interest in her. With a buzz, it flew back toward Qin Mu. The mosquito stung him and flew up by itself again. Meanwhile, rumbles came from Qin Mu's body that sounded like thunder. Bolts of lightning then came from the sky and struck him, tearing him in the blink of an eye. Mu Yingxue had been refining poisonous herbs during that time and had refined a small bottle of a drug. She raised her head and drank it all, making her fine black hair that had spread out in all directions to fall off, not a strand left. The tail at her buttocks also fell off. The woman lifted her pants up with a black face, then stretched out her arm to let the mosquito sting it. The next moment, she grunted and collapsed on the floor face first. Crackling sounds came from underneath her as she grew 8 legs all over her body, which resulted in her looking like a hairy spider. "Your poison is very intense." Mu Yingxue screeched in anger. "Try my poison now." The mosquito flew back toward Qin Mu, and his expression changed drastically. He immediately prescribed new medicine for himself to undo the cold poison while retorting sternly, "Do you think I'm scared of you?" The two of them pitting poison against each other was a new sight, making Xiongxiu, Xiongqia, and the rest watch with flabbergasted expressions. When the two had first clashed, the poison had been on the jade bottle, so Qin Mu had used the 3-legged toad to detox it while changing the toxicity at the same time. The 3-legged frog was affected by the toxin and thought that Mu Yingxue was a delicious food, thus it hopped towards her with highly toxic poison in its belly. Mu Yingxue then used her vital qi to transform into an insect who had another kind of toxic inside it. When the toad ate that insect, the toxicity in its body had transformed again. Qin Mu then released the unusual mosquito he had captured in the basin of West Heaven Palace, borrowing its primitive toxicity to absorb the blood of the toad. This caused an unusual change, making it sting Mu Yingxue and poison her. After Mu Yingxue detoxed the poison, she planted poison in the flying mosquito to make it sting Qin Mu, testing his abilities. The two of them exchanged blows and exhausted all their means. With every move, they had to undo the poison of the other side, ensure that the unusual mosquito wasn't poisoned to death, and also attempt their best to poison the opponent. This required extremely high attainments in making poison and detoxification. If they were careless and didn't poison the other side, they might get poisoned by their own creation. Qin Mu looked at the mosquito flying over and frowned. He raised his hand and said, "Wait a minute. Your poison refining ability is similar to mine, so since that we want to determine who's the winner, why should we poison ourselves?" Mu Yingxue was also slightly unable to take it. When she heard that, she immediately looked at Xiong Xiu and the rest with a smile. In that case, you shall poison Yu Buchuan and I will detox his poison, then I will poison Nai Kuei and you will detox it. Don't worry, Yu Buchuan is now the little young master of True Heaven Palace, so his position currently isn't any lower than that of Nai Kuei. The expression of Xiong Xiu and the rest changed drastically, and even Yu Buchuan, who was lying motionlessly on the floor, cried out silently in dismay. The two who pitted poison against each other dazzled his eyes. Even the famous cold poison from poisoner Mu Yingxue was used, but she still couldn't do anything to Qin Mu. This showed that his attainments in knowledge regarding poison were no lower than those of Mu Yingxue. To use poison on me. If the poisoner can't undo it, won't I end up dying? He wanted to escape, but the anesthetic was not yet undone and his soul was still paralyzed. Qin Mu laughed. Poisoning oneself is not considered an ability. You and I don't have weak attainments in the poison path, so we should seek a stronger target. Only poisoning the strongest existence to death can be considered an ability. Mu Yingxue revealed a curious expression, itching to start. Nai Kuei is one of the strongest existences in True Heaven Palace and her cultivation was shaved off by my coiling silk, so is my poison path still not strong enough? Qin Mu patted the huge tree beside him and smiled. That is not considered anything. If we are to compete with poison, let us choose this great demon to fight. It is a root demon that had absorbed blood from a god and a devil, and so possessing both the bloodline of a god and devil. With this power, it is extremely extraordinary. If you want to poison it, you will have to make the toxicity suppress the blood of a god and devil, to have the means to poison gods and devils. Mu Yingshue's eyes instantly lit up. She examined the huge tree that had transformed from the root demon, and her heart began to stir. Practitioners of poison view poisoning gods and devils as their ultimate goal, so to poison a strong practitioner of Divine Bridge Realm is indeed not considered an ability. All right, I will agree with you. You and I, whoever can poison this root demon will be the winner. A strong practitioner on Celestial Being Realm showed a look of despair and struggled to move forward. Poisoner, there are important matters at hand. Mu Yingxue gave him a glance and sneered, I'm not interested in the fight over authority within True Heaven Palace. In my eyes, poison is the important matter. I and this little brother appreciate each other, so we naturally have to fight to our heart's content. This is so we won't let down what we had learned our entire lives. Suddenly, everyone collapsed onto the floor, and even the dragon Chelin, Xiaoxiu, and the two white bats crumbled to the ground. The three strong practitioners on Celestial Being Realm also fainted from the drug. Mu Yingxue looked at Qin Mu and said firmly, it's rare for Yingxue to meet such a Dao friend, so we must play to our heart's content today. I didn't bring enough spirit herbs, so I need to go gather herbs in Great Ruins. 2 days later, you and I shall meet under this huge tree and execute all our methods. Qin Mu sighed. All right. After he said that, he placed a jade bottle that was half open. For the next 2 days, lost fragrance would leak out continuously, so no one would be able to come close to this place. The two of them made their moves and headed to other places to find spirit herbs, abandoning the dragon Chelin, Xiaoxiu, and the rest. After they left, the huge tree began to struggle in an attempt to move, wanting to pull its roots out to take this chance to escape, but what could it do when it was fixed in place by the green dragon bead? It was unable to pull away even an inch. This video will end here.